Welcome, Leslie. Ooh, all the way from Mexico. Awesome. So glad you're here. Someone from Quebec, Elena. Glad you're here. All right, I think I'm going to get started. So today I'll be sharing tips and strategies for using Listenwise to make learning more fun. If you have any idea or way that you've used Listenwise in the past, please put that in the chat. We love hearing from people who are using Listenwise. You guys are the experts in your classroom, and we want you to be able to share with others. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is English Runyan. I'm a curriculum developer at Listenwise. I've been with Listenwise for about a year, but before that, I taught high school and middle school ELA in the Fort Worth, Texas area. Some of my favorite things that I do at Listenwise are writing the instructional resources that accompany our podcast. And also creating and sharing professional development materials like I'm doing right now that help teachers make the most of all the Listenwise resources. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can always email me. My email's up here. And then also, Chelsea, my partner in the marketing department at Listenwise, will be assisting in the chat. So that's also a really great place to participate today. And you can ask questions, and then she'll alert me, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them in real time. Next slide, please, Chelsea. So here is today's agenda, but I'll add if there's anything that you want to learn today, a specific takeaway, feel free to put that in the chat, and we might be able to go a little off the cuff to answer any questions or share some other information with you. So today in this webinar, you will learn how Listenwise podcasts are engaging and educational. And then I'm going to give 3 tips to add fun with podcasts. So those tips relate to searching for student-friendly content, implementing weird news routines, and providing windows, mirrors, and doors to your students. So there's lots of reasons why Listenwise is a strong instructional tool. But when I think about my life as a busy teacher, when I put back on my teacher hat, what I would have loved about Listenwise is how fast I could have found and implemented engaging podcasts for many purposes with my students. With Listenwise, you aren't wasting time, and I wasted a lot of time. Well, it was very productive, but it took a lot of time finding things that were good quality, age appropriate, not too long, not too short. At Listenwise, we've done all that work for you. We carefully curate our collection each week, and we create curriculum. All you have to do is know your students, and we trust that you know what they need, and then choose the right topic or instructional focus. So we publish 7 current events a week. We have curriculum, connections. It says here we have over 2,800 ad-free podcasts, carefully curated, connections to ELA, social studies, science, and current events. Lots of teaching resources, including automatically graded quizzes, external links to curated content online that we think pairs well. And then we also have thematic collections for social and emotional learning and diversity, equity, and inclusion that include student voices. We've been doing a lot of work adding more thematic collections. So if you haven't checked them out recently, please do. So let's talk a little bit about the science that supports the educational value of podcasts, and then we'll get into all the fun. I'm going to be discussing what we know about listening from cognitive science, and I'll also share some research about the connection between listening and literacy and social and emotional learning today. So advances in brain imaging technology have given us some new insights into how the brain works when we listen, and how listening helps us learn. We understand language by simulating in our minds what it would be like to actually experience the things that we're hearing. So the brain sees what it hears. We call this the auditory scene analysis. For example, if you hear a story about a chef who's cooking up a delicious meal, maybe frying up some garlic for a pasta sauce. This story wouldn't just stimulate your language processing areas, but it would also stimulate the olfactory and gustatory parts of your brain. So your smell and taste, you're going to just want to eat what he's cooking. This research comes primarily from Benjamin Burgeon, a professor in cognitive science at the Department of UC San Diego. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, listening really engages our brains. When you're listening to a story rather than reading it, you must process the information at the same rate it's being presented. So listening can transport you. I'd like you to experience the auditory scene analysis concept for yourself today. So let's listen to a story that takes you into a faraway forest in Southeast Asia, where scientists are searching for the next killer virus. And to make this experience more fun, I ask that you close your eyes. And as you're listening, think about what your brain's doing. What can you see? What can you smell? What can you taste and feel as you're listening? And then afterward, we'd love to hear what stood out to you in the chat. I always like to see what catches people's attention while they're listening with their eyes closed. So let's head over to this story.
Here's the thing. Places that have lots of crazy animals like this have lots of crazy viruses. Oliver is trying to find out what viruses are inside these animals, so he's trying to catch them.
Oh, that's what it will sound like when an animal goes in there.
Oliver's team has set up metal traps on the ground and up in the trees.
Okay, just don't step on that trap.
These traps are set up to trap rodents and small mammals.
What he really wants to catch is a bat.
Yeah, to the bat nets we go.
There are a dozen nets, strung like huge spider webs, high in the trees.
The nets are open, the traps are baited and open. The rain is coming, unfortunately, so
now we just wait.
now we wait.
For the bats to go hunting and fly into one of these nets. Then we can take their blood and look for new viruses.
Michaeline! We got one.
Oh, there it is. Wow, he's so cute. Oh, look at his wings.
Little puppy face.
Little puppy face.
Short-nosed fruit bat.
Short-nosed fruit bat. So he's going into a bag.
Which he can breathe through.
The bag helps keep the bat calm as we carry him to a makeshift lab near the trapping site.
So we're
All right. I hope that you enjoyed being transported. We would love to know what stood out to you while you were listening in the chat, so feel free to add that there. While I listen, something that catches me all the time, in fact, I kind of jump, is when I hear that trap. It's almost like I feel trapped. And then other things, when that storm rolls through, I can almost imagine like darker clouds, getting a little bit darker. So you really see that experience of your brain doing more than just hearing. All right, so our next concept is listening and literacy. Listening and literacy go hand in hand. Pairing a pre-recorded fluent reading of a text, so not like computer language, actually hearing someone speaking, is a powerful solution not only for reading, but for language learning. Reading along with transcripts helps students increase their accuracy in reading by 52%. And improves comprehension by 76%. So listening while reading helps kids recognize sounds and learn letters, learning new words, and become better listeners and understand how stories work. That inherently helps them be better speakers and readers as well. Ooh, I'm seeing a little chatter in the chat. Some people... That short-nosed bat caught their attention. I have no idea why they described it as cute. I never would have done that, but to each their own. So lastly, let's talk about listening and SEL. So storytelling is also powerful for social emotional learning, which we in the educational community know is a vital need after all the challenges of the last few years. We all need that, especially students. So good stories have the power to captivate the most reluctant readers. Stories told aloud allow the listeners to connect emotionally to the people that are speaking. That's because you're hearing the emotion in people's voices. This doesn't always happen when students are struggling to read or stumbling over unknown words while they're reading themselves. So audio helps students put themselves in someone else's shoes and really feel that experience. The belongingness theory states that people listen to emotional information, like i.e. stories, out of a desire to experience a social connection. And I think we all want to experience those connections after not having as many over the last few years. Listening decreases our social anxiety and increases our psychological safety. And every teacher wants their classroom to feel like a safe space. Research also shows that listening to a story together as a group out loud builds even more empathy. All right, now to adding the fun. We are going to cover 3 tips to add fun to learning with podcast lessons. All right, so my first tip for you today is pretty simple. Search for student-friendly content on our platform. I'm probably a little biased, but I think all the people who work at Listenwise are just innately fun people. Um, and several of us are former K-12 teachers, some of us are parents, so we know what kids like. And then we also regularly confirm our gut instincts about what's cool with kids by learning from the data about what podcasts on our platform are listened to most frequently. And then we also definitely depend on what we hear from educators who use Listenwise often in their classrooms. It seems that what is most fun for kids are some of the topics that are listed here. So students love all things animals. So that bat story we listened to, they would really appreciate. They love strange news. They're inspired by hearing positive news, as we all are, and they especially like when that positive news includes other students' voices. Like all of us, students want to learn about what's popular and relevant to their lives. Just a little info right now, our recent current event about Wordle and other puzzle crazes is getting the most listens. So if you haven't listened already to that one, please check it out. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through our platform to kind of show you what it would mean exactly and give you some step-by-step advice for finding that student-friendly content. All right. So first things first, don't be afraid to filter for fun. And that could even incorporate using some kind of awkward search terms. So just going to throw it out there. I'm going to search for poop and let's see what we get. This would fall into the category of weird science that kids love. Awesome. We have 7 stories that pop up. They cover a range of topics. It looks like, science is definitely covered, social studies, there's some current events. If you're worried about the poop content that you find, maybe you teach younger students, you can always filter to just show elementary appropriate stories. We still have 2 things, and these are really neat. Like I can see not only fun, but educational content. So the poop collector studies microbiomes. I can imagine that would be fun and funny, but it also probably talks about the scientific method and like what it takes to run a good experiment. The second story would be really good. It gives 2 popular topics. We got animals and we got weird science. Okay, the next thing that I would recommend is searching for student-friendly sources. So we source a lot of our podcast from NPR, but podcasts that we don't source from NPR, we typically tag them. So for example, this right here, this birds and their eggs and poop, is a Brains On from our Brains On podcast partner. So if I click this tab, I get all of the other stories that are from Brains On. And they're all really highly engaging, made for students. Okay. A lot of science and social studies there. For secondary audiences, I'd recommend looking for our youth radio stories. Okay, so we see one here, promposals, aging out of foster care. And these are super engaging to stories. It's a good source because they're all produced and they're produced by teens. The reporters are teens. They're going to cover topics that are important to today's youth. And then you can see that they all have these youth radio tags. Okay. Another thing that I would do when searching for fun and filtering for student-friendly content is I would check out our collections. We've been doing a lot of work to get more collections. So these are our thematic collections. So these, if you go up here, I click lessons, I go down to collections. We have a ton. So great to see. I'm scrolling down and here I see one of our new collections, elementary animal adaptations. So we know animals are a fun topic for students. We have another elementary collection, animal behavior. Not only are these fun for students, but when we decide the ideas for our thematic collections, we are keeping in mind what topics are usually in K-12 curriculum. Okay, this is really fun. It's a new collection, holidays. And then thinking a little bit more about our secondary audiences. Go to the next page. These are my personal favorite collections. They are our Youth Voices collection. So they're not all produced by teenagers, but they all feature a child or a teen sharing their perspective. You hear their voices. So we have 3 Youth Voices, Civic Engagement, Youth Voices, Innovation and Discovery, and then Youth Voices, Passions and Perspectives. Again, if you've not looked at our collections recently, I think just in the last 6 weeks alone, we have 7 new collections. So I would really encourage you to check those out. Now I'm ready for my next slide. Okay. Okay. After you've found that perfect student-friendly podcast, that's not only fun, but it'll also support your curriculum. I suggest that you try to get some lively class discussion going. And one way to do that is by prioritizing our self-reflection discussion questions. So all Listenwise current events and lessons include comprehension questions and discussion themes. One of our discussion themes for each story invites students to connect the ideas from what they just listened to their own lives. And we hear a lot from teachers that when students hear other people talking, especially young people, like in those student voices collections, it inspires them to speak as well. They feel a little more comfortable. It's like someone else has raised their hand first. So you can just see how exciting some of these would be. If we look at this one on the far right, from our young adult dystopia story, this is the question. One of the young people in the story says that teens are cynical because they were born into a world their parents screwed up. Do you agree with that idea? I could just see some of my past 8th, 9th, and 10th graders kind of going off and having something to say. And that's what we want. It makes learning more fun. All right. I hope that first tip for adding fun got your imaginations flowing and you're thinking about how you can implement these different strategies and tips in your classroom. It's time to move on to our next tip, which is implementing weird news routines. If you're not familiar with weird news, they are our 30-second or less fun current events. They're full of academic vocabulary. So this is vocabulary that students need to be successful across content areas, but also in life. Those vocabulary are then we use them and we incorporate them into the questions that are with the current event. So not only would they listen to them, but they'd have to think about that word in the context of answering the question. Okay. Now I'm going to show you a strategy that you can use while you're implementing a routine. There's lots of routines you can use. You can learn more on our blog or in other webinars, but this one is a routine and a strategy that helps students make inferences. It comes from Kylene Beers, and in this, she's helping students practice noticing when an appropriate time to make an inference while listening or reading would be, and then also it guides them through doing that. So a teacher would prompt her students to notice when a character in a story behaves or thinks in an unexpected way based on what they know of that character in the past. Or they can just think about a detail or event in the story that's weird, unexpected according to what typically happens in life. So you can see how weird news is perfect for this strategy. And then the sentence stem provided, a reason why blank instead of blank, is what students can then use to plug in their inference. So let's try this out. Let's listen to weird news, relaxing with bees. And I'm going to stop it at a certain point and we're going to do the strategy.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Martin. When it comes to de-stressing, everyone has their own routine. Think about the ocean, put some relaxing rain sounds on. But in Slovenia, they turn to bees. For centuries, this small Central European nation has used the sound of buzzing bees to relax their citizens. When kids become restless in class, they go listen to the school's beehive.
That was weird. That was something different than I would expect in my everyday life. So as a student or a teacher, I would model this. I would use this sentence stem. A reason why. What was the unexpected thing? Kids are listening to bees at school to relax. Instead of, and then as a class, we would brainstorm, well, how do we relax when we're feeling stressed? Maybe students might say, listening to music. I know my students always used to say, oh, miss, can we listen to some music as we work? Or maybe taking some deep breaths. I'm working on that with my son actually right now. Let's take deep breaths. We need to relax. And then after that, they could put their inference. There isn't a correct inference. The strategy is mostly about enjoying weird news and learning an appropriate time to make an inference. So I would model a lot of different options. Students here could put is people in Slovenia aren't afraid of bees. Or maybe they have a lot of bees there. Or there's a bunch of different things. But what you'll find is if you use the strategy while reading or listening, if you keep listening or reading, you usually find out you usually get the answer to your question or your inference. So let's see if we do.
Reports that more than 1 out of every 200 Slovenians is a beekeeper, which is a force to be reckoned with.
It ended with a funny pun, and we got an answer to our inference, which is there's tons of beekeepers there, so they're easily available. All right, we are moving into our final tip for you today to add fun. And so that is providing students with windows, mirrors, and doors. Rudin Simmons Bishops describes the power of literature to provide students with windows, mirrors, and doors. Like other instructional text, audio stories can offer those windows, mirrors, and doors as well, and they deepen and enrich learning experiences. Podcasts that serve as mirrors can validate students' identities and experiences. If you're relying on a textbook or things that you've used every year, what students are reading or learning might not reflect their own lives, but because Listenwise is constantly updated, we try to make sure that we have inclusive content. You can find something to mirror your students' identities. Podcasts that serves as windows may build background knowledge, and this is necessary for reading comprehension and understanding of diverse perspectives. Finally, podcasts that serve as doors can foster empathy, which we talked about earlier, and then other skills that build competency and social awareness, and really address the goals of SEL as outlined by the Castle organization or the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. A great way for teachers to offer their students windows, mirrors, and doors is by offering their students choice. So student choice naturally adds engagement, but then when your brain is activated learning something new or, relating to yourself, it's going to be more fun as you learn. You've heard me talk a ton today. So this next strategy or tool is going to come from a teacher. She's a teacher in Keller, Texas, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and she's teaches 11th and 12th grade ELA, and then also a journalism, also a journalism course as well. So let's take a listen. Oh, we need the audio.
This is kind of the main one that I feel like worked for me in my classroom with my 10th and 11th graders. So usually what I'll do is I want to make sure in this assignment, I want to give students choice. I feel like that's such a key to their engagement. We know that that really draws students in and they have that option. And the social emotional learning component is woven in. So I'm not teaching it explicitly, but it's going to be part of the podcast that we're going to look at, and you'll see that when we get to it. And that cross-curricular content, that's part of our T-test as well, is making sure that we're giving students opportunities for cross-curricular content. This is a great way for your teachers to do that. So in this strategy, I'm going to give students a list of podcasts to choose from after we read a mentor text together, or they read it individually. And I'll ask them to choose from the list at least one that they're going to listen to. And most of these are really short, 3 to 5 minutes long. And most of the time, students will choose to listen to more than one because they'll be interested in more than one topic. But I want to give you a second to look at some of these titles. And I think you're going to see what I mean about how these social emotional elements are already woven in. So for example, the lesson on the right, I had students in my contemporary media class looking at a few different topics in journalism and news. And so you can see the last choice here is a 9-year-old journalist supports food banks. It's a great SEL component right there about our empathy for others. There's also news for teens by a teen. And this one was really engaging for my students, where they learned about how a peer is using media for themselves as well. So a lot of different topics they could choose from. And then usually what I'll have them do next is on an assignment, I'll have them summarize, talk about which podcast they chose, which one spoke to them, why did they choose it? And I really love this fourth question on the list, where I ask students, did this podcast include ideas or perspectives that were new to you? And I have to tell you, my students come up with perspectives that I never considered when I listen to some of these. I think our students are so much smarter than we give them credit for sometimes. And they really get so much away from these podcasts, where they're hearing different people. They're hearing from authors, illustrators, writers, people in their community, and they get a lot of different perspectives that maybe they hadn't encountered before. So that's what I really love about these. And then they'll see these questions again and again throughout the year. So they know when they get that podcast assignment every few weeks, usually, then they're going to be asked these same types of questions. So when they're listening, they're already thinking about, what's a new perspective? What's a new idea that I can get from this one? And then usually we're going to see in this clip that English is going to play for us, you hear several different people speaking. So they're really engaged with it. They're listening for different voices. And there's also usually a transcript included that I know most of my students do take advantage of as well. So they're reading and they're listening at the same time.
And one thing Nicole had mentioned. Right, you can stop that, Chelsea. Sorry about that. I thought that it was going to stop on its own. All right, I hope you enjoyed listening from Nicole talk about giving choice, particularly thoughtful about the choices that she gives them, opportunities for windows, mirrors, and doors, other SEL concepts like building empathy. To wrap up today's session, as you've seen today, there are so many ways that you can implement podcast for academic and just fun purposes in your classroom. If you don't already have a premium account, I encourage you to start an individual trial, but it'd be even better if you got a colleague from your school or inside your district to sign up with you as a school trial, and that extends the trial from 30 to 60 days, which is really enough time to see if Listenwise is going to have a positive impact in your classroom. With Premium, you have access to standards-aligned lessons. They have more instructional materials, student accounts, assignments, data tracking, and then scaffolding that supports a larger group of students. Okay, and then We really appreciate you making time to be here live, or if you are watching later on, we're so glad that you're here and getting this information. If you have any session takeaways, big ideas, aha moments, things that are just making you excited, please share those in the chat so we can be excited for you and learn from what you thought was a good takeaway. And then if you have any questions, please put that in the chat as well. We'll be staying for a little bit and we can answer those for you.